there's 1,000 deals this year where I feel I can create value and it fits into my box, I want to do all 1,000 of them. But if there's no deals for the next 10 years that fit into that, I'll do 0 deal. For me, I think one of the reasons why I was able to be successful is I still worked somewhere else for 10 years, spending thousands, tens of thousands of hours really perfecting my craft. And I was somewhere that had very little staff. I was one of maybe 4 people in the office. So I was doing everything. I was doing the development. I was doing the construction. I got my GC license to be a builder. I was doing the leasing. I was doing the management. I was doing the advertising, the marketing, everything. So my advice would be find somewhere that's a small operation where you could touch all these things and learn from experience instead of working at, some large corporation where you're relegated to, being a small cog in a huge machine and you don't get access to working on all aspects of a transaction. So for me, that was very beneficial.
Today you've accomplished a lot of things. I've read some of your stories in Espace magazine and what people have said online about you. How did you get to where you're at today?
If you're talking about real estate specifically,
let's talk about that first.
I'll say that it was by chance.
By chance.
I didn't grow up always wanting to be a real estate developer, that's for sure. As a matter of fact, if I go really far back, in high school, I was pretty terrible student and very misbehaved. I had a lot of energy and it was very, very difficult for me to pay attention in class. And I wasn't interested.
Did you have good grades or not good grades?
I would say that they were extremely average. I was definitely a troublemaker because I wasn't interested. And finally, in grade 10 in high school, they gave us the option of choosing a couple classes.
Okay.
And I chose to specialize in a science stream. And I loved it.
That you paid attention to.
Because I was engaged, I started doing phenomenally. Actually, so my mother, every year she would go to the parent-teacher interviews. And that year she walks into the science teacher's class for the interview, and the science teacher says, "Your son is a genius." She said, "No, I'm here for Ian Quint. You made a mistake."
You're mistaken.
Yeah, you're mistaken. So that was really the kind of the impetus for me to, I was so engaged and I liked it so much that, I saw I was capable of performing well when I was interested. And eventually I went to Boston College and I specialized, I was in health sciences. So at that point I decided I thought I wanted to be a doctor.
Yeah.
I think I saw an episode of ER. Do you remember that TV show?
Yeah.
So I saw an episode. It looked pretty entertaining. So that's what I thought I wanted to do. And at that point I became a good student because I loved what I was doing. And I graduated. I went to McGill. I got a degree in anatomy and cell biology. And at the time I thought I was going to be a cardiothoracic surgeon. That was my goal. So
very stressful.
Very stressful, but real estate wasn't even a blip on my radar.
Yeah,
so what happened was in the last year of university, they had a program where they would set you up with a doctor that in the field that you wanted to specialize in, and you would shadow him for a day.
Yeah.
So I showed up to the hospital. I walked in, and immediately I was just overcome with panic because I said to myself, I hate hospitals. I should have thought about this 5 years ago. There's no way I could ever walk into this place as my place of work for the rest of my life. And so, I was overcome with panic because I said I'd spent the past 5 years studying to be a doctor, and I know for sure this is
Not
off the table now.
But what did you see? Did you see people in distress or
it's just the
smell?
feeling, the smell, the whole atmosphere. It was really instantaneously, I knew it was not for me. I hated it. I ended up watching the surgery, which also was not that pleasant.
You didn't faint.
No, it really wasn't a good fit. And so I graduated and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I said to myself, I don't want to take a year off and just do nothing and, discover myself or whatever people do.
Yeah.
So I said I might as well just go to law school. So I thought I was not interested in being a lawyer, but I said, I don't want to waste time. And while I'm figuring it out, I'm going to kind of work on this law degree, and it'll be at a minimum a good education.
You didn't want to travel, like backpack Europe or something?
I had already backpacked Europe twice.
Oh, okay.
So I wanted to get going.
Okay.
So I graduated from law school, and I went to law school in Toronto.
Okay, so what age are you at that time?
It's a good question. I was probably 18, and I graduated, I was 21.
Okay.
So I graduated. I was in Toronto. I went to Osgoode Hall. And while I was in Toronto, and I promise you eventually I'm going to answer your question.
Oh, don't worry. We're good. We're good.
While I was in Toronto, there started to be kind of a real estate boom there and a lot of redevelopment. Okay. That was my first kind of inkling that I might be interested in real estate. And while I was there, because I knew I didn't want to be a lawyer, I tried to really diversify my classes to learn a little bit about everything. So I had a securities law class, I had a real estate law. And to this day, I'll tell you, I think it's the best thing that I did. I think it's a phenomenal education for anyone that wants to be in any type of business. And it served me very, very well in my real estate career. And anyhow, I graduated and I went into real estate, but it was all really by chance.
All right. So now I'm interested into getting into how did you start your first deal? Like you graduated, you're in Toronto, you've been exposed to this boom and to the real estate market. And then what happened?
So I graduated. I knew I didn't want to be a lawyer.
Yes.
But my mother had been telling all of her friends that my son's in law school and he's going to be a lawyer. So I didn't want to disappoint her. And in Quebec, to get called to the bar, you have to pass the bar exam, and then you have to article for a year at a law firm. And I never wanted to work at a law firm. I knew that. But in New York, if you pass the bar exam, you get called to the bar and you're a lawyer. So I decided I'm just going to write the New York State bar exam. So at a minimum, my mother can say I'm a lawyer and she wouldn't have lied to her friends for the past 3 years. So
that was a good gift.
So as I was studying in the summer, I was back in Montreal, and as I was studying for the bar exam, and I knew I wanted to do something in real estate, a family member of mine who had a small real estate portfolio and had a gentleman working for him who was doing all of the construction, the management, and the leasing. This gentleman had quit or retired, and he was looking for someone, and he called my father and asked if I would be interested in coming into the office. So the day after I wrote my bar exam in New York, I started in that office.
Nice. It is by chance.
Very, very, really there was no plan. It all happened by fluke, I would say, but I'm very glad it happened because I love it and I love real estate. And it's very hard to do anything well or be successful if you don't love it and you're not passionate about it.
Because it's very hard, right?
It's hard, and to put in the hours and the time and dedication, it really can't feel like work. Has to be fun for you. Otherwise, you're counting the minute, and it's a miserable life. So one thing, I wake up every morning and I thank God that I found, I think, what I was meant to do and something that's fun. I never wake up and say, oh, I have to go to work.
Oh, it's Monday again.
Yes. So I'm very excited to go to work. I never know, if there's going to be a new opportunity, and I love what I do. So I would say that I really haven't really worked a day in my life. To the contrary, when I told you I do triathlon a bit. When I'm training for my Ironman distance triathlons, to me, that's work. That's what I consider really the work.
Oh my goodness. And I'm sure that back then you didn't see that where you're at today. There was no you foreseeing that you would be in this position. Really
not. One thing I did know, even when I was studying to become what I thought was going to be a doctor, is that I never wanted to work in industry where I'm just selling my hours. So as a lawyer or a doctor, right, you're getting paid for your time. And just the way my mind worked, I thought that was too limiting. So, you can only achieve a certain amount of, let's say, financial success because you only have a certain amount of hours to sell.
Yes.
So I never liked that concept, and I always wanted to find something where I wasn't being put in a box.
So you knew you wanted to leverage, you didn't want to be in that category. That's very good. I mean, that's the best way. You're not trading time for money.
Correct. I didn't know what I wanted to do necessarily, but I knew what I didn't want to do.
And looking back, were there some major mistakes like in your real estate journey? Bad deals, or I don't know, people
You know what? You
stabbing
asked
you?
me a question, earlier about my first deal, and I
Yeah,
never
go
even
ahead.
told you about it.
Go ahead.
So, not that falls into the bad deal category.
Yeah, go
Actually,
ahead.
it was a great
It
deal,
was a
but
great
it was again coincidental that it was a great deal because I really didn't know what I was doing, and it worked out by chance. So eventually, when I stopped working with this family member and I went out on my own and I started my own business, my first deal was buying a retail shopping center
wow.
of, I think it was about 170,000 square feet. It was in Longueuil on a piece of land that I think was about 600,000 square feet, and there were almost no tenants left in this center. It was not well maintained, it was falling apart, and it was really in a sad state. But the price, in my estimation, I thought that I'm paying for it, just the land was worth a lot more than I was paying. And in my mind, the 170,000 square feet of building was for free, and I can invest to fix it up and then hopefully attract some
And how old
new
were you?
tenants. It was in December of 2014, so I guess that was exactly 10 years ago.
That wasn't that long ago at
Yeah,
all.
it was not that long ago. So I was 34. 33, 34, yeah. So I bought that with some partners. I had no money. So I had two partners that I brought on who lent me my part of the equity in the shopping center. And my whole history before that was really as an industrial ground up developer, not as buying existing shopping centers. So I had very minimal experience in it.
You mean your experience from where you were working?
Yes,
with family
yes.
member?
I was really specifically an industrial developer.
Okay.
And really only in, part of the reason why I left that was because industrial and really on like one or two streets in the same city. So the portfolio was very limited and in geographically and in size. I went off, I did this, we renovated the whole facade, plan somehow came together, I got tenants, and I didn't have any connections with any of these retailers, but we ended up over time filling up the center. We ended up building actually two additional buildings over time on the land, and it ended up being a very successful project in terms of financially and both as a learning experience. But today when I drive by that center and I look at it and I see the sheer magnitude of how big it was, I think to myself, like, I really must have been out of my mind to think on my first project that I could do this.
Wow, but it's impressive. And you had no money.
None.
And you believed that you could do it.
Maybe I was crazy because when I drive by this, it seems to me like an insurmountable task for someone's first
Did you keep it?
experience. But it was successful. But
Yeah.
I don't know if my ego was so big that I thought I could do it, but it ended up being a fantastic project.
But I like that because a lot of people, they believe, okay, I have no money, then therefore I can't do it. But you did not believe that. You
No.
did not let that. So you said, okay, I don't have money. Let me find out who has the money to fund this.
Yeah, in my mind, I thought of it almost as the opposite. I thought of it as there's more money than there are good projects. So again, maybe I was fooling myself, but I thought that if I had a good project, that there would be a lineup of people that wanted to support the project.
That's nice. I like that. So people listening, don't just stay focused on saying, okay, I have no money, therefore there are no other options. There's always maybe a way that we have to think creatively to figure it out.
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, if it wasn't that way, people that were born without money or in situations like you would never be able to be successful.
Exactly.
So again, maybe I was overly confident, but I thought, in essence, where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah, I really like that philosophy. And did you keep the deal or you sold it?
So I still own it today.
Nice.
We've probably refinanced it over 3 times since then. And actually, up until I think last year, we built one of those additional buildings there, which was a Starbucks. And it's still a great center for us. And no, it was really, I guess I was lucky also that the first one was a success story and that I was able to rent it out. Thank God it was a good experience.
And have you had any bad ones since then? It's been 10 years.
So I would say in real estate, I haven't had any real losers.
Okay.
And I think the reason why is I'm very disciplined about how I invest. I have to make my money when I buy it. Okay. So I have to buy it well enough that I know tomorrow it's worth more to somebody else. Okay. So, I'm in the value creation business. I don't overpay. So certainly have there been projects where I thought it was going to be a grand slam and it only ended up being a double or a triple? Yes. Okay. But everything that we've done, thank God, has been had some relative level of success. Okay. And I think it's because we buy well to begin with. I don't think you can go wrong if you buy well. Okay.
So there's a whole strategy on what to look for, do your due diligence.
Correct.
Things like that.
We have a niche of where our sweet spot is, and we're one of my kind of philosophies is if there's 1,000 deals this year where I feel I can create value and it fits into my box, I want to do all 1,000 of them.
Really?
But if there's no deals for the next 10 years that fit into that, I'll do 0 deals. So I'm very disciplined in that sense. And because I make my money as a developer on the real estate, and I'm not the type of developer that just charges fees and to their partners and that's how they make their money, then I really, my interests are aligned with my partners, and the real estate has to be successful for me to be successful. So I'm disciplined in that sense. I won't do a deal just to do a deal to collect fees. Okay. In other words. So, but again, I'm such a deal junkie that if there's 1,000, I want to do all 1,000.
So, but is there a balance between your emotions? You're like, oh yeah, I want to have this piece of property. Like your emotions get ahead of you.
There's no balance. There's no balance. I think any passionate entrepreneur would tell you that there's no balance.
If they're all good, you want them all.
Yes.
You make it happen somehow.
Yes, and for sure, if there's X number of deals a year and there's a limited amount of money you have every year to do deals, you have to find other ways to make it happen.
I see your business name on a lot of properties. Like when I'm driving around, now I see them because I've heard of you. I'm like, oh yeah, I guess that's Brasswater. There's another one. So it seems like you own the city.
One at a time.
One at a time. All right. So if I wanted to position myself, let's say in the next 5 to 10 years, to make it, let's say, in the commercial real estate, hypothetically, what are some of the steps? What do I need to do today to prepare me at that time?
I could only tell you what worked for me.
Yeah, of course. Based on your experience, yes.
One thing I could tell you is a lot of people have different ways of being successful and making money that I don't understand myself and is not the way I would do things, but it's worked for them. Yeah. For me, I think one of the reasons why I was able to be successful is I still worked somewhere else for 10 years, spending tens of thousands of hours really perfecting my craft. And I was somewhere that had very little staff. I was one of maybe 4 people in the office. So I was doing everything. I was doing the development. I was doing the construction. I got my GC license to be a builder. Okay. I was doing the leasing. I was doing the management. I was doing the advertising, the marketing.
You did everything.
Everything. So my advice would be find somewhere that's a small operation where you could touch all these things and learn from experience instead of working at, some large corporation where you're relegated to, being a small cog in a huge machine and you don't get access to working on all aspects of a transaction. Yeah. So for me, that was very beneficial, that I was doing everything and it was small enough that they were relying on me to do everything. So I got a lot of experience very quickly, and the size of the operation was the key factor.
So basically what you're saying is that to be expose yourself as much as possible, immerse yourself in the environment that you want to succeed in. Yes. I guess that goes in for every business, basically.
100%. But again, I think, if you were going to go work at some large corporation, no matter how much you want to expose yourself to, they'll probably say, stay in your lane. This is your job. This is your task. And the other thing is you won't necessarily have exposure to the people that maybe you want to learn from. Because there's so many levels of bureaucracy between you and those people that, it'll take you a long time to have access to them.
So small business or startup.
That's how I did it. So
Yeah.
I could only speak from my experience. There's certainly things that work for other people, but for me, it was that.
And what is the goal for Brasswater in the next few years?
So it's a question that I'm asked quite frequently.
Probably, yeah.
So I would tell you that I have no financial goals. When you have goals that are strictly financially based upon, in real estate, I want to own X number of buildings or X number of square feet, you don't make decisions for the right reasons. So you're making them either for your ego and that's when you start to make mistakes.
Okay.
So I have no goals in terms of growing my portfolio to a certain size. My goals are really to continue growing the same way we've been growing, which is, like I said, choosing these deals, but doing all the deals that we can that match our criteria and staying away from those that don't. Really, when I analyze a deal, I have really two criteria.
Okay, go ahead.
One is, can I create value? Is a very clear path. Do I understand how I'm going to create value? And that's something I can determine in 6 seconds. If you show me a deal, I could look at 2-3 numbers and I could tell you, is this a good deal for me? It doesn't take me any longer than that. If I have to get my guy to do spreadsheets and manipulate all types of numbers, it's not the deal for me.
Wow.
And then the second thing is it going to be fun? And part of is it going to be fun means, can I sleep at night? So, in other words, if me and you could buy a building and we're going to make $1 billion, but you're going to be a terrible partner and I lose even one night's sleep, it's not worth it for me.
Yeah.
So
peace of mind is important.
Very, very important, especially at this stage in my career where I'm not desperate to do my first deal. Becomes increasingly important. So those are really the two criteria that I try and stick to, and my only goals are to stick to those criteria and grow the business.
And they serve you well, so...
Yes.
Yeah. But were there days where, I don't know, was there any point in time where you wanted to give up or things didn't go well or anything like that in your journey?
It's an interesting question. I never, ever wanted to give up. That's for sure. That was never entered my mind. It was never even a fleeting thought. There are certainly days that are harder than others where things don't go your way. That's natural in any business and any part of your personal life. This happens. You can't control it. So things are tough and you push through. Another thing that's very important to me is to always keep moving forward. Yeah. So I try and focus on that when I have those days. There's days where there's deals that you've been working on for 6 months and 2 at the same time die in one day, and it's very frustrating that you spend so much time and energy, but you have to pick up the piece and you have to go forward. If I spent a year looking back on, I lost this, I would never be able to move forward. I'd miss the opportunities that are right in front of me. So that's a lesson I learned also early on in my career, is always be moving forward, learn the lessons from what happened, but then take it and move forward. Don't live in that lesson in the past and lament about it. Learn the lesson, go forward. So that's really been kind of how I run the business. But I will say there's certainly days that are challenging where I think to myself, it would be much easier for me to sell everything, pick up and go to the Bahamas. But I'm just not the type of person that could ever do that. Unfortunately, I'll die at my desk. I know that. I'm never going to sell the business and say, I'm going to live the rest of my life in some paradise and walk on the beach every day. That's great, but I just don't have the personality for it.
Because you love what you do. Yeah.
I love it, and I could never do it. So even when I think, that would be fantastic, it's not realistic for me.
All right, so let's segue to, you do have another business, an investment, Cyberin investment?
Yes.
Do you want to talk briefly about that, what it is, and who does it serve?
So Cyberin's a private equity business. We invest mostly in startups and other private businesses that require capital. We're not extremely sophisticated. We do deals really on a deal-to-deal basis. We're not actively hunting like we do in real estate. It's fun. I try and target businesses where I feel that I can add some type of
Value. Yeah.
So whether it's from a real estate perspective or, through connections of mine, relationships that I think could help this business grow. So that's what we do. I mean, it started off almost as a hobby, but it's become a real business.
So then people are reaching out to you. They know you have it. And
So almost 100% of the businesses we've invested in have been inbound calls. We're not actively searching out opportunities, but it's been a fun kind of experience for us.
And have you noticed there are some, what are some of the do's and don'ts when startups are reaching out to investors?
So again, I'm very unsophisticated in this, but I have to tell you, just like in real estate, I have certain rules that I try and stick by. And because, again, I'm much less sophisticated in this, I mean, really the difference between my real estate operation, this is my instinct whenever a deal's presented to me in private equity is to say no, right? I swing at very few pitches as opposed to real estate where I'm extremely active. Yeah. But the businesses that do interest me are businesses that I understand.
Yes.
So the only time I've gotten into trouble is when I've had FOMO and I've invested in something, I've followed someone else and I didn't really understand the business. So it has to be something that I understand, and I don't understand that much. So it has to be something that I clearly understand the business and their path to growth. And the second thing, which is more important, is I bet on the person.
Okay.
So I really bet on the entrepreneur. So if someone comes to me and I see that they're so passionate and they're going to die before they let this business go and they will give everything they have, to me, that's worth more than anything else.
Yeah. They have to have similarity to you, actually, on how you would handle it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I really, really bet on the person.
That's interesting to know. So how many deals did you do last year? I don't know. In this
private equity deals? I'd say last year it was probably our slowest year. But I mean, in general, since we started, we've done a lot of deals. We've probably done about 30 deals.
Oh, that's a lot.
Yeah, yes.
And then, you have a niche in particular? I don't know, tech?
No, I mean, we have some stuff in technology, which is my field of lowest competence. We have some healthcare, pharmaceutical stuff, some stuff in transport, retail.
Very diverse.
Yeah, it's very diverse. It's really case-by-case basis. There's no particular industry that I'm focused on.
I just realized I forgot to ask you, how many real estate deals did you do last year?
Oh, my God. I don't know. But I could tell you in 10 years, I've done hundreds.
And I don't know, do you want to share the value of that? Or
to be honest with you, because of what I told you before, I actually don't know because I don't keep track. Yeah. I really don't keep track. The second I start focusing on that instead of doing good deals on a deal-to-deal basis, means my ego is getting in the way. So I'm sure it's like a relatively impressive number, but I don't know what it is. But our portfolio today is about 14 million square feet of property in Canada and the United States. And every year we acquire about 3 million square feet of property, somewhere around there. It could be a little more, a little less. And even though we're long-term holders, every year somehow we've been approached and sold a couple assets here and there. So, probably maybe we've acquired 20 million square feet since I've started, and the result now is somewhere around 13 and 14 with sales that we've made.
And who do you look up to, Ian?
Professionally?
Could be that, or in your personal life, people that you said, this person, like you model after them, your mentor, or I don't know.
Well, I would say a big part of my motivation in general is my father. I constantly want to make him proud.
That's nice.
So that's a strong motivating factor for me. In terms of mentors, in my personal life, both my grandmothers, who are no longer with us, unfortunately, I was very close to, and they were both businesswomen, and which was in that time not frequent.
Yeah.
So my grandmother on my father's side, she was a single mother. My grandfather died before I was born, very young, and she had 2 young boys, and she actually got into real estate. I don't know how, but somehow she acquired a couple buildings, and she used the rent to support my father and my uncle, and provided them a very nice life. And my grandmother on my mother's side, when my grandfather, who had he had a wedding dress business, he was in 3 malls across Quebec. Eventually, he lost all his money, and my grandmother was supporting the family by selling clothing out of their apartment. So they were both very, very business-oriented in a time where that was very uncommon, and they were both really the matriarchs of the family. And so that was a huge, huge influence on me in my personal life. And also, incidentally, one of the reasons why I'm a very, very firm believer that we need a lot more women in entrepreneurial roles. Quite frankly, I think they're much better, and there should be a lot more of that. In my professional life, I could tell you, I never really had a mentor that took me under their wing and showed me the ins and outs of the business. I learned from doing, but I could say there are a lot of developers before I went on my own whose transactions I would analyze, and I would learn from them even though I wasn't directly learning from them, and I'd analyze their transactions. I'd see how they structured their deals and what I could learn from that. One of them was Vince Chiara from Group Mac, so he's very, very active, and I really think he's probably at the apex in terms of volume of acquisitions and deal structure. And then the other, I would say, who's both a personal and professional role model, is Dean Mindell from a company called Forum. So this gentleman, he's developed really a Class A retail portfolio, while at the same time remaining one of the best people that you've ever met, which is very hard in this industry, which is full of vipers. So he's really just a phenomenal person, and really the only business person I know who's managed to be very, very successful and just remain completely above the fray morally. He's a fantastic person. So he's really someone who I admire.
So the industry is cutthroat.
Yes, listen, it's a cutthroat industry. I think any industry where you're dealing with big dollars, and in some cases where you can make quick money, attracts a certain type of person. And I think that unfortunately people are willing to do a lot of things and sacrifice a lot of their morals to make money. So this industry is certainly no exception. It's probably one of the worst. And Dean is really a role model for me.
That's nice. That's nice to know. And for people listening, and then they want to get into the business, entrepreneurship is their passion. You talk a lot about that already. But if there are some key points you wanted to highlight, or maybe something that I didn't ask you want them to get out of this conversation, what would you say? I
would say really, when I think of an entrepreneur, I think of you have to have really 2 qualities. One is you have to have a vision. You have to be a visionary. Without that, there's no idea or vision to give life to. But then the second part is the vision is worth nothing unless you're going to work hard and give life to it, right? And then it's just an idea that's going to die with you.
It's delusion.
Yes. So, if you don't give life to it, you're going to die and the idea will never manifest. So you really have to be a hard worker as well. So you can't have one without the other. And often there are people that have big ideas and they're thinkers, but they're not doers. The other thing is, if you're to be an entrepreneur, you have to be able to live with a certain amount of risk. And if you can't do that, you're out of luck.
Well summarized for this one. All right. What are some books that you would suggest for entrepreneurs that you've read, you think they were good?
People give the standard answer of Art of War and nonsense like that. I don't know that there's a specific book for entrepreneurs, but I could tell you, I'm reading a book now called, I think it's called The Splendid and Vile. It's about Winston Churchill, but about a very limited period of his life at the beginning of World War II.
Okay.
And the book is basically a compilation of first-hand accounts from diaries of cabinet ministers that he had around him and other people, family members. And one thing it really shows is how one person could have such a huge impact on the entire world. If it wasn't for Winston Churchill, very likely the war would have gone in the other direction.
Yeah.
At a certain point, and this is the period that the book takes place in, Europe is completely under Nazi control. Britain is the last line of defense, and the United States has no interest in the war whatsoever. So the whole world is really relying on Britain, and Britain is relying on really one man, Winston Churchill, because there were a lot of appeasers at the time in cabinet who said, let's not fight this guy, let's strike a deal with him. And he was really the last line of defense, and it was one person that changed the whole course of history. So out of that book, that's kind of the lesson that I got.
That one person can make a whole difference.
Yes, a huge impact.
Yeah, definitely. And what do you like about the city of Montreal?
Oh my God, that's a big question for me.
Yeah.
I love Montreal. For me, because I grew up in Montreal, the first time I went anywhere in Canada that wasn't Montreal or Quebec was when I went to school in university in Toronto. I'd never even been to Toronto until I went to university. So to me, Montreal, Quebec is Canada. And I could tell you also, because I had the experience of living in Toronto, Montreal is really a special city. Not just because of the mix of cultures we have and language. We have our geography. We're surrounded by water. It's beautiful. We can drive half an hour and go skiing.
Yes.
I mean, you can't do that in Toronto. So we're really blessed like that. And, apropos our conversation, entrepreneurship in Montreal, the entrepreneurial spirit, I would say is number one across Canada.
Really?
100%. I would put up the entrepreneurs in Quebec against the entrepreneurs in Ontario any day of the week. I mean, just think about we have an all-star team. If the Saputos, we have so many names that are so big. Like we really, for such a small city, generate. We have a great entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah, very good point. Very good point. I like that. Well, Ian, this concludes our sit down for the podcast. It was really nice talking to you.
It was a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. Until next time.
All right, have a great weekend.